The silence in the neuro ICU was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic mechanical hiss of the ventilator breathing for my 8-year-old son. Jacob lay motionless in the bed, a tangle of wires and tubes connecting his small, pale body to the machines that were currently the only thing keeping him alive. He had just come out of emergency spinal fusion surgery, and the doctors had told me the next few hours were critical to determine if he would ever walk again. I was holding his cold hand, watching the heart monitor trace jagged green lines in the dark, when my phone vibrated against the metal tray table. The sudden light was blinding. It was a text from my mother, Michelle. She did not ask if Jacob had survived. She did not ask if he was paralyzed. The message read, "We need $6,000 immediately." The lighting at the venue is tricky, and Jessica refuses to get married without that celebrity videographer. Send it now. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. And since we have just welcomed 2026, I want to wish you all a year filled with peace, justice, and the strength to choose yourself. If you are ready to support this channel and hear how I handled this betrayal, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us grow. I did not cry. I did not throw the phone against the wall. I did not even type out a furious reply detailing exactly how many tubes were currently keeping my son alive while they worried about lighting angles. Instead, a strange, icy calm settled over me. It was the kind of clarity you get when a fever finally breaks. I looked at the demand on my screen, $6,000 immediately, and for the first time in my life, I saw my family not as people I loved, but as a bad investment I had been pouring capital into for 32 years. I opened my banking app. My fingers were steady. I navigated to the transfer screen. They wanted a contribution to the videography fund. I would give them one that matched exactly how much they valued my son's life. I typed in 0.60, 60 cents. In the memo line, I wrote 3 words, "Buy a tripod." I hit send. The confirmation screen flashed green, a small, digital middle finger, but I was not done. That was just the warning shot. The real weapon was the joint account labeled Family Emergency. It currently held $56,400. Every single cent of that was money I had earned working double shifts and holidays at the hospital. Years ago, my mother had convinced me to add her as an authorized user. She had framed it as a safety net, saying, "What if something happens to you, Sarah? I need to be able to access funds for Jacob." As I stared at her name on the authorized user list, I finally understood the trap of normalization. It is like the story of the boiling frog. If you drop a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in tepid water and slowly turn up the heat, it cooks to death without ever realizing it is in danger. I had been cooking in this water since I was 5 years old. I was conditioned to believe that my role in this family was to be the infrastructure, the wallet, the safety net, the problem solver, so that Jessica could be the art. I was the frame. She was the portrait. I was the backstage crew. She was the star. Giving my mother access to my life savings was not an act of trust. It was the final stage of my conditioning. I had normalized my own exploitation so thoroughly that I thought being used was a love language. But the heat had just spiked. The water was boiling, and I was finally jumping out. I clicked on Manage Users. I selected Michelle. The app asked me to confirm. Removing this user will revoke their access immediately. Cards in their possession will be deactivated. I looked at Jacob's chest rising and falling under the hospital sheets. I thought about the $56,000 that was meant for his college, for his recovery, for his future, and I thought about my mother. Scrolling through videographer portfolios while her grandson's spine was being fused, I clicked Remove. The screen refreshed. Her name was gone. The balance was safe. I changed my password. I changed my security questions. Then, I set the phone down on the tray table. The air in the room felt different. Lighter. I had just detonated a nuclear bomb in my family dynamic, and the silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. I pulled the chair closer to Jacob's bed, took his hand again, and waited for the fallout. I knew it would not take long. The bank notification would hit her phone any second now. The war had officially begun. To understand why 60 cents felt like a mercy, you have to go back 72 hours. You have to go back to the morning the world actually ended. It was 5:30 in the morning when I drove Jacob to the hospital. The city was gray and asleep, but inside the car, the air was thick with the kind of terror that makes it hard to breathe. Jacob was clutching his stuffed dinosaur so hard his knuckles were white. He had asked me the night before if Grandma Michelle and Aunt Jessica would be there when he woke up. I had looked him in the eye and promised him they would. I had called them both a week ago. I had begged. I was not asking for money then. I was not asking for a favor. I was asking for witnesses. I told them, "He is terrified. I am terrified. Please, just be in the waiting room." They had promised. My mother had said, "Of course, Sarah. Family comes first." But at 6 a.m., when the nurse came to wheel Jacob away, the chairs in the waiting room were empty. There was just me, standing by the double doors, forcing a smile onto my face so my son would not see my heart breaking. "They are probably just parking," I told him. A lie. A necessary, jagged lie. He nodded, trying to be brave, but I saw his eyes darting to the elevators until the very last second when the doors swung shut. I sat down in a blue plastic chair. I watched the clock. 6:30, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. The surgery was underway. My son's spine was being cut open, his vertebrae fused, his spinal cord exposed, and I was alone in a room full of families who had actually shown up for each other. I checked my phone every 5 minutes, expecting a text about traffic, a flat tire, an emergency. Nothing. Silence. Until 8:15. My phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. It was not a direct message. It was a post. I opened the app, my thumb hovering over the screen, expecting maybe a prayer request or a supportive post about Jacob. Instead, I saw a photo that made the bile rise in my throat. It was bright. It was sunny. It was a high-resolution, perfectly filtered shot of my mother and Jessica. They were not in traffic. They were not having a crisis. They were at the Golden Ridge Vineyard, an hour north of the city. They were sitting at a rustic wooden table covered in an elaborate charcuterie board. Jessica was holding a glass of rosé up to the sunlight, laughing with her head thrown back. My mother was smiling that tight, proud smile she reserves for moments that make her look wealthy. The lighting was golden and soft, the exact opposite of the harsh, fluorescent hum of the hospital waiting room. But it was the caption that shattered me. 2 words, followed by a sparkle emoji. Priorities. I stared at the image. I zoomed in. I could see the condensation on the wine glass. I could see the expensive imported cheese. While I was sitting in a room that smelled of antiseptic and fear, praying that my son would not end up paralyzed, they were debating between the prosciutto and the salami. They had not forgotten. They had chosen. They had looked at the calendar, seen Jacob's spine surgery and menu tasting, and decided that one offered better lighting for their social media feed. In that moment, the grief did not hit me. What hit me was a cold, hard realization. I had been protecting them from the truth of who they were for years. I had been paying for my own abuse, and as I looked at the empty chairs next to me, I realized that their absence was not a mistake. It was a statement. And I was finally listening. Back in the present, the aftermath of the 60-cent transfer hit like a shockwave. My phone did not just vibrate, it convulsed. The first call came 2 minutes after I hit send. It was my mother. I declined it. Then came the texts. "Sarah, what is this? Is this a joke? We are trying to secure a vendor here." I set the phone to silent, but the screen kept lighting up the dark hospital room like a strobe light. Then came the voicemails. I listened to the first one through my earbuds, keeping my eyes fixed on Jacob's sleeping face. "Sarah!" My mother's voice was so loud it distorted the speaker. "I am at the bank. They are telling me I cannot access the account. They are saying I was removed. You need to fix this right now. You are stealing family property. That money is for all of us. Do not make me call the police on my own daughter. Stealing. She called it stealing." The $56,000 in that account came from my paychecks, my overtime, my holidays spent changing IV bags instead of opening presents. She had never deposited a dime, but in her mind, my resources were her property. This was the narcissistic arithmetic I had lived with my whole life. My money was our money. Her money was her money. My time was her time. Her time was precious. Then Jessica's messages started rolling in. Voice notes. Long ones. I played one. Her voice was not angry. It was dripping with that specific weaponized pity she used to control me. Sarah, I know you are stressed. I know Jacob is sick, and that is hard. But you do not have to take it out on me. You are just jealous because my life is moving forward and yours is stuck in a hospital. You are sabotage happy because you are miserable. Do not ruin my wedding just because you are unhappy with your choices. I sat back in the uncomfortable plastic chair, letting her words wash over me. Jealous. Unhappy with my choices. It was almost impressive how quickly they had spun the narrative. In their version of reality, a child's spinal surgery was not a tragedy, it was an inconvenience. It was a plot twist that stole the spotlight from the golden child. Jessica was not worried about her nephew. She was worried that his surgery was upstaging her menu tasting. The demand for $6,000 had not just been about greed. It was an attempt to recenter the universe. By forcing me to pay for the videographer, they were trying to force me to acknowledge that the wedding was still the most important thing happening in the world. It was a tax on my attention. They wanted me to panic. They wanted me to apologize, to transfer the money, to re-add my mother to the account, just to make the screaming stop. That was the old script. That was the Sarah who believed that keeping the peace was worth setting herself on fire. But that Sarah had died the moment I saw the caption, Priorities. The Sarah sitting in this chair was new. She was cold. And she was done negotiating with terrorists who shared her DNA. I did not reply to the texts. I did not return the calls. I opened my contacts list and found a number I had not used in 5 years. The wedding venue manager. I left the ICU for exactly 1 hour. The nurse, a kind woman named Brenda who had seen more family drama in that waiting room than a soap opera director, promised to text me if Jacob so much as twitched. I did not go home to shower. I did not go to the cafeteria. I walked 3 blocks to a mailbox store that had a notary public on duty. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the sheer adrenaline of finally pulling the trigger. I had remembered something crucial. 5 years ago, when Jessica had first gotten engaged the first time, before she broke it off because the ring was not big enough, I had co-signed a contract with the Golden Ridge Vineyard. At the time, my mother had framed it as a formality. They just need a guarantor with a steady income, Sarah. It is just paper. I had signed it because that is what I did. I signed things. I paid things. But I remembered the fine print. As the financial guarantor, I had the right to withdraw my backing with 48 hours' notice, provided the event hadn't started. The wedding was in 3 days. I drafted a formal letter on the notary's computer. Notice of withdrawal of financial guarantee. It was cold, legal, and absolute. I, Sarah Miller, hereby revoke all financial guarantees for the event scheduled for June 15th. I authorize the immediate release of the hold on the venue dates. The notary stamped it. The seal crunched into the paper, a sound more satisfying than any door slam. I scanned the document. Then I called the venue manager, a woman named Linda who I knew professionally from my hospital's fundraising galas. She answered on the second ring. Linda, this is Sarah Miller. I am sending you a legal document. I am pulling the funding for the Jessica Miller wedding, effective immediately. There was a pause. Sarah, are you sure? This cancels the booking. They will lose the date. I am sure, I said. Cancel it. Send the notification to the bride. Okay, Linda said, her voice dropping to a professional whisper. Consider it done. I will email the cancellation notice within the hour. I hung up. I stood on the sidewalk, the city noise washing over me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows down the street. Somewhere, at a vineyard an hour north, my mother and sister were probably toasting to their perfect weekend. completely unaware that the ground beneath them had just dissolved. The sun was setting on their photos, but for the first time in years, my sun was just rising. I walked back to the hospital, not as a victim, but as the architect of their ruin. I had taken away the money. Now I had taken away the stage. When I returned to the hospital, Jacob was still asleep, his breathing steady. I sat with him for a moment, just to ground myself, before heading down to the lobby to meet with a specialist from my bank. I had called ahead and requested an emergency audit of my account activity. I needed to know the damage. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The specialist, a young man named David with a serious expression, met me in a quiet corner of the cafeteria. "Miss Miller," he said, opening a folder. "We have secured the account as requested, but there was a flagged transaction attempt that I think you should see." He turned his laptop screen toward me. It was a transaction log. I scanned the lines until my eyes stopped on a timestamp. May 14th, 10:14 a.m. The day of the surgery. The exact moment the surgeon had told me he was making the first incision. While I was in the waiting room, gripping a rosary I had not used since confirmation, praying to a God I was not sure I believed in to save my son's ability to walk, my mother had been busy. The log showed a transfer request for $20,000. The recipient? Golden Ridge Vineyard. Venue upgrade package. The air left my lungs. $20,000. Not for an emergency. Not for medical bills. For an upgrade. For better chairs, or fancier wine, or a slightly more picturesque backdrop for their photos. She had not just asked for the videographer money later as an afterthought. She had tried to steal his future while his present was hanging in the balance. The transaction was flagged for unusual activity because of the amount, David explained. It did not go through immediately. It was pending authorization when you removed her access. She tried to take it, I whispered, the horror of it settling in my bones like lead. She tried to take $20,000 while my son was in surgery. Yes, ma'am, David said softly. It appears so. I looked at the timestamp again. 10:14 a.m. That was the kill shot. That was the moment any lingering guilt, any residual sense of filial duty, evaporated completely. There was no misunderstanding here. There was no "we just wanted to help." There was only predation. My mother looked at my life savings, not as a safety net for her grandson, but as a resource she was entitled to harvest whenever her golden child needed to shine a little brighter. She did not see Jacob. She saw a distraction. She did not see me. She saw a bank. "Print it," I said, my voice cold. "Print the log. I want a certified copy." David nodded and printed the document. I took the paper, folded it neatly, and put it in my purse. It felt heavy, like a weapon. I thanked him and walked back to the elevators. I did not feel sad anymore. I did not feel betrayed. I felt focused. I had the evidence. I had the truth. And I was ready for whatever came next. I knew they would come. The venue cancellation email would have hit Jessica's inbox by now. They would be desperate. They would be furious. And they would come here, to the one place they knew I could not leave. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, staring at the printed transaction log, when I saw them. Michelle and Jessica burst through the revolving doors, their faces a mask of frantic entitlement. They were not looking for the ICU. They were scanning the lobby for me. Jessica was wearing a white bride hoodie, her makeup streaked with tears. My mother looked less like a concerned grandmother and more like a CEO whose merger just fell through. They spotted me and stormed over, ignoring the startled looks from other families. "Sarah!" Jessica shrieked, her voice echoing off the tile floor. "What did you do? The venue just called. They canceled everything. They said the financial backing was pulled. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "Fix it," my mother demanded, slamming her hand on the table. "Call them back right now and tell them it was a mistake. Re-sign the guarantee. We have guests flying in tomorrow. You are ruining everything." I stood up slowly. I did not shout. I did not cry. I looked at them with a calm that terrified me slightly. I am not fixing anything, I said. I canceled the guarantee because I am no longer funding your delusions. You selfish, jealous bitch. Jessica spat. You are just doing this because Jacob is sick and you want everyone to be miserable like you. I am doing this, I said, lifting the paper in my hand, because while my son was having his spine cut open, you tried to steal $20,000 from his college fund. I held up the transaction log. The timestamp was highlighted, 10:14 a.m. While I was praying he would not be paralyzed, you were trying to wire yourself a venue upgrade. You did not just abandon him. You tried to rob him. My mother's face went white. She opened her mouth to argue, to gaslight, to say it was a loan, but the evidence was right there in black and white. That was for the family, she stammered. We were going to pay it back. With what? I asked. With the money you do not have? With the integrity you do not possess? I looked at them, really looked at them, and for a split second, I faltered. This was my mother. This was my sister. If I walked away now, I would be an orphan. I closed my eyes and let myself imagine the alternative. What if I gave in? What if I fixed it? I saw a future where Jacob was 18, his college fund gone, his self-worth destroyed by a grandmother who only visited when she needed cash. I saw him learning that love is transactional. I saw him becoming me a wallet with a heartbeat. I opened my eyes. That future was not going to happen. I chose the world without them. I spoke to hospital security. I said, my voice steady. I showed them the threats you sent me. I showed them the attempt to access my finances. They have flagged you both as security risks. 2 security guards were already approaching, their expressions grim. You aren't visitors, I said, handing my mother the printed log. You are trespassers. If you ever come near me or my son again, I will have you arrested for attempted fraud. Get out. Jessica started to scream, but the guards were there now, firm and immovable. Ma'am, you need to leave the premises immediately. I watched them being escorted out, Jessica still shouting about her wedding, my mother looking back with a mixture of shock and hatred. The revolving doors spun, and then they were gone. The lobby was quiet again. I took a deep breath, the first full breath I had taken in years. I was alone. I had no safety net. I had no family. But as I walked back to the elevators to go see my son, I realized I had something much more valuable. I had my dignity, and my son had a mother who would burn the world down to keep him warm. 6 months later, the air in the park was crisp and smelled of pine. I sat on a wooden bench, watching Jacob navigate the playground equipment. He was wearing his leg braces, but he was moving. He was laughing. He was climbing the slide with a determination that made my chest ache with pride. The wedding had happened. Apparently, I heard through a mutual friend that it was held in my mother's backyard. No celebrity videographer, no vineyard sunset, just a small, tense gathering that stripped away the glamour and left only the reality of who they were. I had not been invited. I had not cared. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope that had arrived yesterday. It was from my brother, Alexander, the one who had stayed silent through it all, the one who had watched the abuse and done nothing. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note. I am sorry I did not stand up for you. I hope this helps with Jacob's therapy. I looked at the check. It was a lot of money. It could pay for months of physical therapy. It could start rebuilding the savings I had depleted during my time off work. But it felt heavy. It felt like hush money. It felt like he was trying to buy his way out of a guilt he deserved to feel. I did not tear it up. I did not cash it. I put it back in the envelope and slid it into the bottom of my purse. Maybe one day, when Jacob was older, we would decide what to do with it. But for now, it stayed uncashed. I did not need their money. I needed my peace. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat labeled Family. It was the last digital tether. I pressed delete group. The chat vanished. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. It was full of the sound of my son laughing, The wind in the trees, and the quiet, steady beat of my own heart, finally free. I chose my son's future over their feelings. If you have ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you love, share your story in the comments. And if you believe family is about action, not blood, hit that like button.